Hey everyone, it's Matt, aka Tech Ranger, and today we're going to be taking a look at a weather mod. We're looking at Vivid Weathers, and specifically I want to take a look at how this makes the game look. Previously on the channel we did take a look at Intensity, which is a graphics mod for the Xbox One, and that actually changed the look of the game with some different things like brightness, saturation. But in this video we're also going to take a look at some of the weather effects that you can turn on via the holotape in Vivid Weathers, and just show you generally how to configure your game with Vivid Weathers if you want to get a particular look, how to do that. Now a lot of those settings are similar to Intensity, so if you're familiar with that mod, you're going to be right at home with this one, plus the added benefit of the weathers. So if you like that sort of thing and you're interested in watching the video, leave a like down below, and if you want to comment with any questions down below, that would be awesome as well. But without further ado, let's take a look at Vivid Weathers for the Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and S. If you watch the channel often and watch my Fallout 4 videos, you'll notice that I do really like Tray M film looks. I use a lot of them, and I use the Blockbuster preset quite a bit, but when switching to Vivid Weathers, I would like some options, and there are a lot of options, but you need to do something in order to configure a lot of those options. Now I do suggest reading through the mod description as best as possible, and reading through the one on Bethesda.net as well, just to get a grasp of what Vivid Weathers can do, because it can do quite a bit. So after you install the mod, back out to the main menu and go ahead and close your game afterwards, and then reload up your save. Your game will look different at first, but not everything with Vivid Weathers is active all at once. So you will want to create that holotape, then you get access to all those options like presets and all the different weather types, rather than just kind of waiting for something to happen in the game, which is totally fine if you don't want to mess around with the holotape. But for me personally, that gives me a lot of option and control over what Vivid Weathers does. In this section of the video, we're going to be taking a look at all the Vivid Weathers has to offer, as well as some of the presets and the weather settings, and see if that's something that you're really into. For this section, we're going to be taking a look at all the settings, and I will have timestamps in the description down below if you haven't already gotten here through those timestamps. So the holotape is actually divided up into two things. It's weather control and visual effects. This section is all going to be on weather control, and this is where you're going to have all of your weathers with varying degrees of each, and we'll look at the most noticeable variants of all of these weathers. So the clear weather option, I mean, it's just going to be clear skies, so we're going to move on to cloudy weather, and cloudy weather has varying degrees. You can choose the different types of cloudy weather. Honestly, I think they all pretty much look the same. They're just like slight shades of each, so that is going to carry on through most of these, but there are significant differences on a few of these weathers, including rad storms and rain, or a blizzard, for example. Foggy weather is also pretty similar in that it has different shades. If you pick the foggy option that has the question marks after it, that's going to add rads to your fog. You may or may not want, so that's why you have a bunch of different options, as well as some different shades of fog that aren't much different than the other ones, but definitely feel free to mess around with those. This is because the mod cycles through these as the weather is dynamically changing in the game, so don't expect any crazy differences between like Fog 1 and Fog 10, but you might see it depending on whatever settings are on your TV or monitor that you're playing on. Overcast won't have that rads option, but it is just that, it's overcast, and again, the shades aren't totally different from one another. So I think when we're looking at rain, this is where the mod really changes things on you and really shows you like what it's capable of in terms of like thunder and rain. So there's different options for rain. It ranges from low, medium to strong, and you'll notice those on their own, but you can also add thunder to that as well. So if you're kind of walking around and you want a specific weather and you just want to do like a strong with thunder, then you can get that here, and I really like the differences between all of these. And if you want to, you can add rad storms with snow, which is pretty cool, and the sound effects are awesome. Rad storms were intense in the vanilla game as well, but when you add snow to the equation, it just makes it that much more intense. Or red and rain works too. Now, important thing to note is if you want to go back to the dynamic weather, you can just release the override change, which you just did, and then that will return the game to normal, and the weather will act dynamically as it did before. To round out this section on weathers, there are some miscellaneous ones. You can add a blizzard to the game if you want, so you won't see that much when it's all snowy and foggy out. You can also make it pretty creepy with a Silent Hill option. Or maybe you just like the overcast and you'd rather just have snow. Now let's look at that other option, which is the visual option, and see what we can do with this mod. Now, a lot of the options are going to be derived from what you know from configuring your TV, like brightness, contrast, saturation, in conjunction with some presets. First being the default for vivid weathers, and then moving on to bleak, which is a very desaturated look. Candyland, which is almost the exact opposite, and the saturation is a lot. Cold, which has a desaturated look but has a colder color temperature. Natural, which is pretty much that but just without the cold color temperature. There's Vintage, which has a really warm preset as well as low brightness. And Warm, which is going to round out all of the presets. Now, I think these presets are important because this is where you can work from, and with the settings like brightness, contrast, saturation, bloom, all that stuff, you can kind of tweak it from those presets rather than starting from scratch at the default. So for example, I took the Candyland preset, I turned the saturation way down, and then also because this is at dusk, I also turned the contrast down, which contrast is your white level, so anything white is going to be lifted up automatically. You can see there the screen got a little bit more white. Now brightness and contrast are going to work in tandem with each other. Brightness is black levels, contrast is white levels. Another example that might help you configure these settings is if we start with the default preset, we can see here that the saturation is pretty low, and you can up the saturation, but you got to be careful because if you lower the contrast, that just means that your white levels are going to be pretty white, so that's going to bring everything up, so it's going to make everything look a little more washed out. A high contrast will actually take a lot of that white out, so if you mess with brightness, it's really not going to do anything, or you're really just not going to notice anything because your contrast is so jacked up in the first place. If you pick the sunlight option and turn that to like ultra, it means it's just going to be super bright outside, so there's going to be a lot of light coming from that sun as a source, but if you go inside, it's still going to be the same. And lastly, let's take a look at bloom. Now, what is bloom? Well, bloom is something that was in Fallout 4. The way I understand it, it's basically if you were to take a picture and there was light shining on something, that actually comes through the lens and you'll actually see that in your picture. This is kind of the same thing, but just in a video game. So if you jack the bloom all the way up, you're going to see a lot of sheen on everything. It's going to be a lot more dreamy of a picture, which may or may not be what you're looking for. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope this was very helpful for anyone who's interested in using Vivid Weathers. It's a very big mod and it's a complicated mod. It doesn't take up a ton of space. It's only like 80 some megabytes, but I think there's a lot to digest here. I've seen a lot of other mod videos on Vivid Weathers, so I wanted to take a different approach and just kind of go through all of the settings and try to explain them the best I can. Obviously, I didn't cover everything, and if I missed some things, definitely put that in the comments down below. Maybe it'll help somebody else out, but hopefully this is a good starting point. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.